everybody. Hello, everybody on the recording as well. It is wonderful to see you all, especially like Jessica, all of these wonderful people from way back when. Like Sylvia said, I am sort of a Lamentations junkie. I really enjoy teaching this text. Normally, it is a text that has tremendous meaning to be found. It's a text that I love. And that's how I start out this class, or when I teach Lamentations every year, except for this year. And this year, it's horrible. This year, reading Lamentations, thinking about Lamentations for the past 10 and a half months has been like, I wish I didn't know this text. I wish I didn't have this text echoing in my head. I wish I could erase the verses. I wish I could I wish the Jewish history didn't repeat itself. I wish that the anger that's felt in Lamentations wasn't something I could see in myself. I wish that my cries out for God, for change, for help, for looking at the world and saying, this can't be the case. I wish it didn't feel so familiar. And it's hard sitting here a week before Tisha B'Av. It's hard. I mean, this is Ariel Bibas's birthday, right? He's turning 5 today, hopefully, in captivity in the Hamas tunnels. And it feels very, very different thinking about the destruction of our people that has been going on for 2,600 years and is still ongoing today. It feels very different reading this. I mean, even I prepared this class a couple of weeks ago, and the situation we are in today is very different than a couple of weeks ago. I don't see anybody who I know is sitting in Israel, but if you're sitting in Israel, this feels different. You're sitting waiting to be attacked. People are talking about whether Iran has an awareness that it would be very appropriate to attack Israel on Tisha B'Av. That Tisha B'Av, which is a week from tonight, is the day where historically the Jews' Jerusalem gets destroyed, and we are coming up on that day. And so I think almost all of you have learned with me before, which I very much appreciate. You know that like I am fairly irreverent, that like I like to have fun with the text and all of that. And so what we are going to do today is try to overcome my tendencies towards irreverence, because this is too real. And that I think I know all of you. I don't know if all of you know each other, but we're trying to do something real and something holy today. We're trying to make meaning out of a broken world. We're trying to find a way of being comfort to each other, finding comfort in community in a way that is going to make this tiny little corner of the Zoom world better for an hour. And we're doing that through the reading of Lamentations. I don't care what your politics are. Hope you don't care what mine are. That there's enough hurt in the world that whoever's hurting, whoever is needing comfort, needing coming together, like we are all there for you. We are all here for you. And so, as you guys might know, there's this theory of what led to the destruction of the temple. Well, it was hatred among kinspeople, right? And so we're a week away from the commemoration of the destruction of the temple. I very much expect this Zoom room to be a place in which we are not hating each other. I don't normally teach current events at all. We're not explicitly talking about current events, but they are there in the background. And whatever your politics, whoever you are hurting, feeling hurt for, I do expect all the nice big group of us to make room for grief, make room for anger, make room for questioning. And to know that it's okay if other people don't think exactly what you think. Oh, so big long disclaimer. Welcome. I'm going to give like a 3-minute introduction, and then we're going to start doing the text together. And that's the part I love. That's the part where we get to make meaning together. While I'm doing the introduction, please stay on mute. If you've got questions, throw them up in the chat. And then once I'm done with the introduction, then we get to do normal class and discuss and all of that stuff. So Lamentations. We are here 1 week before Tisha B'Av, which is the commemoration of everything bad that's ever happened to the Jewish people. It's the commemoration. It's the day on which the first temple was destroyed. It's the day on which the second temple was destroyed. It's the day where a certain bad event on the Spanish Inquisition happened. It's a day when a bad event in the Crusades happened. It's the day where the Warsaw Ghetto fell. It's like, if you're looking for places where lots of Jews have died, times when lots of Jews have died in horrible ways, Tisha B'Av is the day you're looking for. And the Book of Lamentations is marking the first of those occurrences. It's marking the destruction of the first temple. It takes place when the very worst has happened. Our country has been invaded. Our city laid siege to. Our neighbors, our families have been slaughtered. We have starved so badly that we have lost what it means to be human. And the only respite for us came when we finally lost and our way of life was destroyed. We were taken from our homeland and sent into exile. That is, those of us who were still alive. And our city, Jerusalem, the place we called home, was burnt to a crisp. God, who created the heavens and earth and chose us to live in the land of Israel, well, God's home has been destroyed. The temple has been destroyed. And the question is God also destroyed? Is God gone? Have we lost God? Is there even still an us to speak of? Does Israel exist outside of the land of Israel? Does Israel exist outside of relationship with the temple? Can Israel exist outside of relationship with God? How do we interact with a God who no longer responds to us? All right. So we have a context for these questions because back in the Torah, in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, we got covenantal blessings and curses where they say, okay, this is what's going to happen. You do wrong, and God punishes you. God punishes you just like happens in the book of Deuteronomy, and nonetheless, still there will be a remnant. We will still exist, and God still exists, but we've done wrong. We've violated God's commandments. We've defiled the land. And so the land vomited us out. And once we've been appropriately punished, then we get to return back to the land. It's, a happily ever after story as written in Deuteronomy and Leviticus. In the way that we're experiencing it in Lamentations, it is not a happily ever after story. This is a too real. I know we had this coming, but surely we can't live like this. Surely you didn't really mean this, because we're talking about dead kids and total destruction. So the Book of Lamentations personifies Jerusalem as a woman and gives her a voice to speak, where she's pushing back against that idea of covenantal curse, where she's pushing back against the idea that this is our fault, where she's pushing back against the idea that not only did we deserve this, but it's some sort of like nice moral lesson for us that's also somehow good for the world if Jews die. So what we're going to do today is we're going to perform just one reading of the first verses of each of the 5 chapters in Lamentations. You guys may be familiar with the fact that Lamentations has 5 chapters. 4 out of those 5 chapters are acrostics. An acrostic is like first line begins with A, second line begins with B, C, D, and so on through Z. No one knows for certain why Lamentations is written as an acrostic. There's a number of psalms that are written as acrostics. It's a technique we use sometimes in biblical poetry. One suggestion I read, which I do really, really love, is, and if you've learned with me before, I just learned this year, so you haven't heard it before. One suggestion I really love is that in responding to destruction, like, we have no words. And we see that in Lamentations, right? We see Jerusalem continually falling silent. We see that in interviews with members of the kibbutzim from the Gaza envelope, right? That you can't start to speak. You see that in trauma victims, right? There's no way to start. How do I process this? I'm numb. I've got nothing to give. And when you start with an acrostic, you say, okay, well, let's start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start. Let's start with Aleph. And then the other thing the acrostic does is it says, and there's a place to end. Because once you start being able to speak, once you start being able to pour out that grief, like, you can drown in it. There's no way to stop, that you relive the experience and this becomes your forever experience. You are stuck forever in the thing that has happened to you. By putting it into acrostic, you say, okay, we're going to get to the letter Taf, we're going to get to the final letter of the alphabet, and then you're done. Then there's a way to step out of re-experiencing the grief that you've experienced. So the thing that the acrostic is going to invite us to do today is say, okay, we're going to read the 5 chapters that have the same first letter starting them. Well, for 4 chapters, and the 5th doesn't follow an acrostic, but we're going to read the first lines of each of these chapters that start with an Aleph and say, there's some development happening here. There's some way of understanding this uncontainable grief. When I open my mouth to cry out, when I'm first responding to grief, which of these 5 approaches is the way that I approach this? Which resonates with me? How do these approaches differ from each other? Am I the one experiencing the grief, as is probably happening in the 2nd chapter, or am I the one seeing other people experiencing grief, and that's probably what's happening in the 3rd chapter? We'll look at different ways that is happening. If you've learned with me before, you know we've got a source sheet with only, I think it's 8 verses on it. We've got 45 minutes. I'd love to get through all 8. If we get stuck and spend the entire next 45 minutes on the first verse, that's also a win, because there is definitely enough there for us to spend an hour on. We're going to try not to spend the entire hour stuck on the first word, but hey, we'll see what happens. A ton of you, I'm about to stop talking at you and we'll get to start talking together. A ton of you are hiding off video. As they say in Song of Songs, show me your faces. Nice to see you, David. Nice to see you, Harriet. I don't care if you're eating. I don't care if you're lying in bed. We're all, yeah, hello. We're making meaning together, so I need to be able to see you. Otherwise, I won't know that you want to say something. When you want to say something, raise your actual hand or raise your Zoom hand, and I'll call on you. One thing is that I'm the only one who gets to speak for 15 minutes at a time here. When you've got to speak, you make your point and you get out. If you have a dissertation about this, send it to me by email and I'll very much enjoy reading it, but you don't get to make the dissertation talks in this class. Go find your own class. Okay, cool. So I don't know if everybody has the source sheet. I'm going to share the source sheet again in the chat. We're just looking at the first verse of every chapter. So we're starting with Lamentations 1:1. I'm not going to share my screen because I want to see you guys. I don't want to see the text. Who have we got here? Is anybody up for chanting the first verse of Lamentations? Marcia chants so beautifully, but she is not here. Any of the rest of you up for chanting? Jess is considering hiding under the table. Um, anybody? It's so beautiful, and it is so not beautiful if I attempt to do it for you. It will take all of the time.
Okay, I'm in.
All right, Avram, go for it.
איכה ישבה ודד, העיר רבת ים, הייתה כאלמנה, רבתי בגויים, שרתי במדינות, הייתה למס.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Avram. And that's, I mean, in some ways we don't need to do any more. Just like hearing that, hearing the pathos in that. Like, but let's dive into it. So we're gonna start with that very first word, Eicha, which I translated as alas, how. Talk to me about that very first word. And if it's stuff you know before because you've taken a lot of classes on Lamentations, that's fine. That's interesting. I'm sure everyone appreciates that. But what I want to know is Eicha now here for you in this class. Who's speaking? How do you feel that? Are you speaking that word? What is the resonance of Eicha, of how, alas, here for you now? What is that word doing? How does it feel? Like, you're all on mute. You can do this. Take a second to say that. Like, where is that word coming from in you when you say that? What is that word doing? Talk to me about that word. Talk to me about that word as a start of this Megillah. Talk to me about that word as like the thing that this Megillah takes its name from. What does it mean that we're reading the book of how, alas? So people, you're raising hands or Zoom hands. Anise.
Hi, Bex.
Hi.
So when I hear the word alas, I feel sad. Because I am sitting alone and I feel alone. And it's it's kind of like, alas, with that kind of helplessness to it.
Oh, Yafé. Okay. So there's lots interesting going on there. This Eicha is it's a sigh almost, the way you're saying it. It's something that's like almost leaking out of your body, and it's something that has sad connotations that at this point we don't know what yet, but as soon as we hear Eicha, we know that like something is wrong, and we're waiting to hear what's wrong. Yafé. Okay, Avi. And then Jess.
To me, Eicha is, how can this be? This is impossible. This is unimaginable.
Yafé. Okay, and that is very much like, this is a lament in the Hebrew Bible, right? And the way laments work is we use the word Eicha, and one of the question we're asking is, things were good and now they're very bad. How is it possible that we got from so good to so bad? This like, cannot wrap my mind around the fact that we are sitting here now in this situation, because I remember Ariel Bibas's 4th birthday, and it sure didn't look like this. Yafé. Okay, Jess, and then Chaim.
Alas also feels to me like unrecoverable. It's not something that we're in the midst of that can be stopped. It's not something that's about to happen. It's something that has happened that can't be, it's like immutable and it's awful, but it's also finished happening.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, that if what Anise said about like it's a sigh escaping you almost, that if this was an ongoing trauma, the noise that would be escaping me wouldn't be a sigh, it would be a scream. Okay. Chaim.
Maybe I'm jumping the gun a bit, but there's a sense of guilt that you must have done something terrible to deserve something like this.
Interesting. Tell me why.
Just that, the basic assumption that God is just and that this wouldn't have happened if we didn't deserve it. And must have done something really, really awful because of the way the situation is.
Okay, awesome, interesting. I would argue, and there's people who would argue against me, I would argue that much of Lamentations is not following that theology. Much of Lamentations, unlike almost the entire rest of the Tanakh, is not following the we deserve this and so we're being justly punished. Rather, Lamentations is saying, okay, I know you said we deserve this, and in fact, maybe we did something bad, but this is too much. Look, God, and see, should the hands of merciful women cook their own children? Like, no matter what we did, this is not the appropriate response. This is too much, God. And I think I don't think anybody said this yet, but I think there is maybe even in that Eicha. Oh yeah, Avi, you were getting close to this. You said this, how could this be? And I think like I did, which we interpreted as how can I wrap my mind around this? I think maybe there's even a little bit of critique in there. Like, how could God let this happen? Or how could, like, who can I hold responsible for the fact that this situation is the current situation? And Chaim, you want to read that as well? I can hold myself responsible. And that is definitely like normative theology of Jeremiah and Isaiah and all the nice prophetic texts. That is less the theology of Lamentations. Yefé. Okay, Don.
Yes, I wanted to give an example of an acrostic and also to express what I thought about that first paragraph. There's an acrostic. My very educated mother just served us 9 pizzas. And this is an acrostic that tells us the number of planets in the heavens. The first letter of each word is a mnemonic for memory for the planetary system. Be that as it may, I get the impression of a bombed out city and a woman who is husbandless and familyless, doesn't have a bread basket full of bread, and is walking the streets in clothing attire, hunting and searching for anything that could bring her comfort.
Yefé. Awesome. Okay. We'll go Chaim with the response, and then I'm going to talk just for a minute, and then we'll keep going because we're not going to get stuck on the first word. Chaim, go for it.
No, not really. I'm just trying to get the thing to the hand thing to go off. So sorry.
That's fine. All right. So Eicha as a word, I think Anis started this out with a sigh. Did you guys take a second just to say it? Because it's like with a ch in that, with the guttural noise, it's a sigh, but it's also like you're throwing something out into the world there. It's a sort of plaintive plea. It's like you feel it from your toes when you say this word. And in some ways, like you're not literally, this is not tears, but it's like it's you can't say it without feeling emotions rise in you. You can't pronounce this word without like physically manifesting emotion. And I want to take you for a minute through where else in the Torah we find this word. We find it most often in the Torah in Deuteronomy, in Moses's mouth. And he's, Eichaing all sorts of things because this is Moses doing his thing in Deuteronomy. That's sort of his shtick. But the first time we find it is in Deuteronomy 1:12, chapter 1, verse 12. I'm going to read it for you. Eicha aseh levadi terachechem umaseechem berivchem. That's, alas, how can I bear levadi, right? Alone, that same root word as boded that we'll find in our verse. How can I bear alone all y'all's problems and all your all's burdens and your strife? But this is I think and wasn't any someone was saying also like that there's this sense of like when you're saying Eicha, like you are alone. You are there's like this guttural cry coming by yourself. And one of the things that's incredible about the Book of Lamentations that we won't get to today, is that over the course of Lamentations, we go from this one singular person crying out Eicha to a community sitting together remembering, and that we go from the sense of like utterly alone to the sense of together we can remember. Okay, let's keep going. Echa yeshva v'dad ha'ir. Okay, alas, how can, and then ha'ir is the city, yeshva is sit or dwell, v'dad is alone. We're going really slowly, guys. So we're going to talk about yeshva. She sits, the city sits, or the city dwells. Now, this is a hard word. I want you guys to think about it with just Eicha yashva. How can she sit? How can she dwell? Dwelling is something, this yashav word is something that we love in the Torah, right? That don't worry, we're not going to just mitgolel be'eretz, right? We're not just going to be sojourners in the land of Israel. Rather, we are going to be the residents. We are going to be the ones who dwell there. We are going to be the ones for whom the land, or to whom the land belongs. That's the promise that God gives to Abraham. Like, your descendants will dwell in the land. That's the, nice, like, will dwell in security in the land. Dwell. There's this repetition of like, you guys are going to dwell in the land and everything's going to be okay. And then here in Lamentations, we get that word again. We have how, alas, how can she dwell? How can she sit? And all of a sudden she's alone. All of a sudden the city is alone. All of a sudden she is not surrounded by all of us. This is the land of Israel without the Israelites. Talk to me about what's coming up for you, thinking about yeshva, thinking about dwell, thinking about sit. Both of those are perfect translations, either sitting or dwelling. What is the image in your head? What are the connotations? Why would we start with this image? I don't know. Do you see this differently now than you did last year, than you have other years? What's happening with this how can she sit? How can she dwell? What's the question that's being asked here? Margie, start us off.
So, I mean, I visualize a place devoid of people and life, and I wonder who it is who is seeing this. So if it's devoid of people, who's viewing it?
Fantastic, right? So that it's how can she sit alone? Well, how do you know? Like, who are you looking? Who's saying this? That's looking at her sitting alone. Fantastic. Okay. What else? Keep pushing, guys. She's sitting alone. Don?
Yeah, it sounds like it's being said from a prophetic standpoint.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
We're talking about who is saying this, and someone is saying this, and I can only say it from the standpoint of a prophet.
Okay.
Recounting something that has transpired. He hasn't gotten to the good part yet.
Okay, maybe, perhaps. The perspective question is a super interesting question, which, if you've learned with me before, we focused on a ton before. Let's not focus on the perspective question today and focus just on that image of sitting alone. What is the question being asked when we say, how can she sit alone? Like, how is it possible that she sits alone? What are we seeing when we see her sit alone? Or what does it mean if we say, how can she dwell? Yeah, Avi.
To me, the word sit reminds me of sitting Shiva.
Correct.
And it's like Jerusalem is mourning alone. She doesn't have anyone to comfort her.
Incredible. Incredible. Okay. Right. So that it's this, she's sitting, she's mourning, she's in mourning, she's sitting alone. It's almost as if, like, I mean, she's on the floor, right? It's almost as if she's collapsed there. She's yeah, your favorite. She's abandoned. She's alone on the floor. There's no one to pick her up. There's no one to sit Shiva with her. Great. Okay. Okay. Other thoughts?
Can you explain or give some more insight into anger from his nose?
We may or may not get there, Don, and when we do, then I'll do it.
Okay.
Yeah, Judith.
Well, on a very simple level, on the current everyday, hello, August 5th, 2024 level, Israel has felt abandoned by the world. I mean, the Americans may send warships, but we realize that on a PR level, we definitely are sitting by ourselves and shocked that anti-Semitism still lives and that the world will not come to our rescue, particularly, or care. That may or may not be true, but that's certainly what we have internalized. On another level, it's important, I think, to realize that this is the Shekhinah sitting by herself, abandoned in the city. And there's a Jerusalem above and a Jerusalem below, and they're cut off. And she has not got the connection that is her lifeline above and below. And she is abandoned and alone. And it is a deafening silence, both on the current level of politics and on the deeply spiritual level.
Wow. Wow. Thank you, Judith. Yeah, I think there's definitely, right? There's something about, like, okay, she's alone. Who should be there? Well, everyone who's been exiled, everyone who should be killed, everyone who has been killed, God, the rest of the world. There's, like, you can fill in the why is she alone with a number of parties who should be rushing to her aid, and they aren't. And we're going to get there, so I'm just spoilers. But as the verse continues, right, we say she has become like a widow, right? And we say, okay, well, like, one of the strongest Torah obligations, one of the reasons you have a Israelite society is so that someone supports the weakest in that society. Somebody supports the widows. And here, there is nobody to support the person who's become like a widow. Okay, and yet, right, she is the city, is Jerusalem, is personified Jerusalem. We're not going to go deep into what exactly that means in this class. We'll go Jess and then Avram.
So if she is the city and not the people, this may not work, but I do like that idea of abandonment that resonates with me, that it's like the story of the covenant or the promise of this, like, entire journey with God has been that we wouldn't be alone, right? Like that at least the relationship was unbreakable. And so the idea of being alone feels like a betrayal of what the promise of the covenant is, right? Or I don't want to say like the promise after the flood, because God's not destroying the earth, but it feels like that was a promise that was made.
Great. Yeah. like that she's sitting alone because God's not there with her. That God, that of like of all the people, of all the parties that could go sit with her, like, and that comes back to what is the question being asked? Who was it who was pushing back? Somebody was saying, oh, Chaim was saying, like, isn't she responsible? And maybe, but I think the question being asked, the Eicha yeshva v'dat, like, how God can you not be going and sitting with Jerusalem, right? Yefeh. Okay. Avram, David, Sylvia, and then we're gonna keep moving a little bit.
So Bex, you got to Ka'almanah before I did, though my hand was already up. But I wanted to second, I think it was Avi's comment that the image is of sitting Shiva. And Almanah is that person who's just lost a primary, life-affirming connection, and they're sitting Shiva, and no visitors are coming. This is an obligation of the world to come to support a mourner at Shiva. And here is Yerushalayim, Almanah has lost myriads of relatives, and no one is affording her comfort.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's the what question are we asking, right? That how is she sitting alone? Well, it's because she's like a widow. Okay, she's like a widow who's dead. Who is the relative she's mourning for? Who is her husband who's no longer there? And that we're suggesting, okay, the only way she could be sitting alone right now, the only way the only way all of this stuff has happened is, well, maybe God is dead. Maybe her, and that's, the God personified Jerusalem relationship that we find in lots of prophetic texts in Hosea, where it's God is the husband of Israel, the wife. And here it's this suggestion, like, how is it possible that all this bad, horrible stuff has happened to us? Maybe God's no longer with us. Maybe God has decided not to support us, or maybe God is just gone. And that is consistent with ancient Near Eastern theology, where which is not exactly what Israelite theology was, but we were living in this context where if you destroyed a god's temple, you also destroyed the god. And one of the things that's incredibly powerful about the Book of Lamentations, about what happens to us after the destruction of the first temple, is we ask that question and we say, well, no, God is not dead. I'm still crying out to God. Is it possible? Like, how can it be that Jerusalem is like a widow? Because God, you're not answering us, but I fully expect you to answer. I fully expect God to come back with an answer. He just hasn't yet. Okay. Yefeh. David and then Sylvia.
So if the speaker, the writer, is now looking at Jerusalem at the end. So Eicha is, how did we get here? How is this the final? How is this final? God gave us the land. We prospered in this land. And then we've been attacked, and we tried to fight back, but this is it? Is this the end? I feel that as I keep reading over that sentence.
Yeah. Oh, they've completely. And that's one of the things that gets me reading this here, right? And with the Yeshav as like, that's the promise. God said you're gonna dwell in your land. And here's this shattered promise. Here we are dwelling. And I don't know if you guys have visited Israel and visited the Otef, the Gaza envelope, or if you've been on video tours or anything, but I think there's something also about this question of how can Israel sit, or how can she sit, how can she dwell, where in some ways it's like when you are wandering around Kibbutz Be'eri and you can say you see the bits that aren't destroyed, or even when you see the bits that are partially destroyed, and you're like, well, how can this still be here? How can there be anything left? Like, we've had destruction happen. We've lost the ones we love. We've lost so much. The whole world has been destroyed. And yet we still have buildings standing. We still have, Jerusalem, the city, has been destroyed, and yet Jerusalem, the city, is also sort of still standing. That there's something about this how can she sit? How can she dwell? Where it's this like mind reeling question of how can destruction have still have happened and the world still exist. Okay, Sylvia.
Thank you. What a beautiful class this is. I coincidentally, before this class, I wrote the first draft of an acrostic on Lamentations. But so this is the first draft, and I don't want to read it all up to you, but on the last 3 lines, 4 lines, I think say what you're saying is that yes, maybe we are abandoned. I don't think I have the hope that you guys have, or that Lamentations has yet. And if you don't mind, I'm just gonna put it out there. Is that all right?
Yeah, go for it. Yes, please.
Take us, steer us, O God, we cry. Take us back to Shuba. The dewy we recite in the ruins. We are lost. We are lost to you, our God. That's the end of it. And that's how I think the beginning of it, what the Lamentations is.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Sylvia. Okay. So we've talked a lot. Well, we talked a lot about Vedad, about this alone loneliness idea already. But does anybody have anything they want to add about the alone loneliness? Are there other things that come up for you thinking about that? How can she sit alone? Loneliness. If you look at the line, right, it's the third word there, which is interesting, right? Vedad ha'ir. How can she sit alone? What comes up for you when you think about alone? What is there? And this is also, I did not bring you any other sources from the Tanakh besides just Lamentations, but this is one of those where if you can think of other places where alone or lone Vedad appears, it's interesting when that's good and when that's bad. So I'll give it to you guys if nobody can think of it, but I think you might be able to. Chaim, take us away. Chaim, was that a hand or no? Okay. Other people's thoughts on alone, loneliness, Vedad, like alone is good or alone is bad, both with the actual word and the concept of alone, or the concept of like singular. What's coming up with this idea? Margie?
Well, I think it's strange that a city can sit alone. I don't think of it. I think the word sit or dwell is unusual in that context. I can see a city. I mean, it just seems odd to me that that's how it's described.
Great. Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. And that's back to the idea of like what is, like, I think Avi asked, like, or said perhaps Jerusalem is meant to connote the people and not the city, but it's sort of crazy that we're saying Gad Ha'ir, the city. And what on earth does it mean that a city sits alone? Okay. Avram, and then Jess, and then Don.
Well, so what this immediately calls to mind to me is, of course, the Bilam line, Hein am levadad yishkon. This is a people that's going to exist. Yishkon is almost yashav, will alone. And then uvagoyim lo yitchashav. It won't be considered among the nations. It won't be valued among the nations. And I'm not certain I know how to deal with that verse, whether it's positive or negative.
Okay, fantastic, fantastic. 50 points for Avram. That we have this verse in Bilam, which traditionally we read as positive. We like Israel is different from the other nations, and it's in this, Bilam saying nice things about us, that we're different from the other nations in all sorts of ways, and we're alone from the other nations in all sorts of ways. And isn't that a good thing? And I'm gonna, as long as we're doing this, I'm gonna add one other thing, which is then in the book of Deuteronomy, corresponding to how Israel is alone from all the other nations, so too God is alone from all the other gods. God is special. God is unlike all the rest of the gods. God is Vadad the same way Israel is Vadad. And both of those times that, like, one would think that those were positive descriptions. Yefé. Okay. Jess.
So what it makes me think of is just creation, right? Like it is not good for man to be alone. Like that seems to be God is rejecting outright this idea of what it means to be alone and making sure that that's not Adam's fate.
Fantastic. Okay. Don and then Sylvia.
There seems to be almost a sound of the Psalms in this book, but I'm thinking of the city being alone, sitting alone. Here was a vibrant city. People came from miles away to offer sacrifices. It was a vibrant place where money was changed, and people looked for healing, and now there's no allies have come to its rescue. It just took the brunt of the force of destruction by itself, and nobody came to offer any help.
Fantastic. Yeah. Great. Sylvia.
Yes, and thank you. I was very struck with this conversation because this morning I saw a map of who we are in relationship to the rest of the Arab world and how tiny this country is. And it was an article that the International Jewish Court was demanding that we give up Gaza and we give up this, and that, like we're this big deal. It was just so tiny. And how we don't feel alone? Of course we might feel alone. And that may very well have been mirrored in the past. We feel alone. I mean, look what happened. What was happening? As Don said, who are our allies, really?
Okay. So talk to me for a second about what's happening with this use of Yeshav and this use of Vadad, where both of those words elsewhere in the Tanakh are perhaps positive things, right? Like, you're going to dwell securely in your land. You are going to be a nation alone, just like God's alone, just like God is singular, so too you are singular. That we're taking these positive words and turning them into Eicha, into like, alas, how can this be? Pulling it from my toes. What does that do? How does that work? And how does it capture the feeling that I think many of us have been feeling for 10 plus months at this point? thoughts on this transformation of positive into negative, this purposeful using of these like positive words to become things that are devastating. And whether that's like, is that purposely an Eicha moment? Why is that? Why is that something that deserves an Eicha? Yeah, Jess, and then Sylvia, and also everyone who's not Jess and Sylvia. I like you guys too. You're welcome to talk. Go for it, Jess.
I feel like I'm maybe just repeating myself, but like I feel like the alone that is the positive alone involves God being part of the alone, right? It's not alone divorced from God. And this has a different feeling to it. Like this is a different kind of alone.
Fantastic. Okay. So what alone means when it's positive, what dwelling means when it's positive is all this covenantal stuff that we've talked about, right? Is that like we are alone to God, God is alone to us, but to be alone without God is to be truly alone. Okay. Sylvia.
And yeah, I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot. This is a wonderful class. I think it's really surprising that in Judaism, a lot of our positive words actually have negative sides.
Mm.
I mean, what I was writing this morning had to do with assimilation. Yeah, we're going to be Americans. Yay, yay, yay. But what are the consequences of assimilation? Because there's good parts, there's bad parts. And I think that is actually true. And what happened in Jerusalem during the first temple and also the second, what happened to us? But the positive was we get to be among other people. The negative is then we get lost.
Interesting. And does it get great, especially with the aloneness concept? I will go Donna, Megan, Don.
Yeah. Throughout life and throughout this picture of destruction of Jerusalem and both temples and life today, I'm getting the feeling that in some way that I don't understand, that God is in solidarity with suffering, that there's something hooking us to God with suffering.
Okay, and that is completely how it's always worked, right? Like we have this idea that like when we are in pain, when we are in need, we cry out to God and God answers us. And that is what's happened all Tanakh. And it's lovely, right? Like it happens at the beginning of the Exodus story. It happens with Hagar in the wilderness. It happens over and over again that like when we suffer, we cry out and God listens to us. And one way to understand the Book of Lamentations is that we're saying like, okay, look, God, look at us. We are suffering. Like we are now suffering. Have we suffered enough that you're going to listen to us now? Like, is this enough suffering that we have like become fulfilled the case of the sufferer and therefore you need to listen to us? And in Lamentations, God is not going to answer back and say, oh yes, you have. Sorry about that. Like, let me take you out for coffee. But in the texts that come after Lamentations, we get God's response, and that's these beautiful 7 weeks that are going to follow from now until Rosh Hashanah, where we get all the nachamu, God comforts us. Yefei, okay. Megan and then Donna.
I'm bringing this to present day, and Eicha is, to me, is just, it's so guttural. It's in my gut. It's fills my whole body. And I just wonder, on October 7th, lonely sits the city. Where is everybody? Where's our community? Where's our defense? Where, as people are being slaughtered, where was the rest of Israel? So where was the government? So I don't mean to get into governmental politics. I don't know enough about it. But if I were sitting in a kibbutz, and as I look at pictures of it and the complete devastation, this fits my emotional feeling about the whole thing. Where was it? And on and on and on. Where is everybody?
Thank you. Yeah, that's completely. And that's where like this is, it's incredibly hard to read this year and see how well it fits. And think about, you know, the texts that some people were sending from their safe rooms to their parents. And, okay. Donna.
Hi. I'm here this morning because I think my higher power had a call that this is where I needed to be. I wonder if other people are feeling the same way, that we are here to have our own little community to talk about whatever it pains us. I happen to have gotten COVID and I'm home and I can't go anywhere and my air conditioning doesn't work and everything is wrong. However, I felt that ALI this morning had a message for me that maybe I would get some feeling of community from coming to here today. And I just wanted to share that I was at a trip in Israel just a month or so in May, and we saw the art, the culture, the beauty of what's going on in the part of Israel that isn't struggling with Gaza and Hezbollah and all of the divisive forces and the evil and terribleness and the hostages and everything. And it's all smacked together in one big messy ball that is still all of us. We're all both, we can see the beauty of the Israeli experience, and yet we see that now everything is kind of torn apart and in chaos. And it doesn't seem to be getting much better. As a matter of fact, maybe worse. So right. More than ever, we need each other, I think. I think we need to be able to talk our painful feelings and our aloneness, and yet our hope that that we hear each other.
Yep, Donna, thank you. And reflection and math. And that's happening in Lamentations, right? As we start with Eicha crying out to God, and the response within Lamentation isn't God responding, but it is all of us responding. Like the city doesn't need to sit alone because we all come and sit with her. And that's what we're doing on Tisha B'Av, right? Is we're all getting on the floor. Whoever said about mourning, we are all sitting with Jerusalem on the floor. We are all coming together in community. And it's the sitting with Jerusalem on the floor that gives us the strength to stand up again. Okay. Avi, really quick, and then we got to end.
Actually, what Donna said was so beautiful to end that I think I'll pass.
So, okay. So we only got through like the first quarter of a verse here. Which thank you guys. That means we like there's so much here. And yeah, echoing what Donna said, I think that this is a painful, scary time for the world. This is a painful, scary time for us. And I hate how relevant Lamentations has felt this year. And it also gives me strength and comfort to know that this is something that we've survived before. This is something that we will survive now, and we will survive again. We're meeting again next week. We'll nominally be looking at all 5 final verses of each of the chapters of Lamentations, but based on how this class went, I think we'll just be looking at the very final 2 verses of Lamentations 5 and focusing on them. So we'll have done the beginning and we'll do the very end. All right. Shavua Tov, and I will see you guys next week.
And thank you for coming. And remember, next week, the time change is again at 10 a.m. Pacific time.